So one of the things that really drives Bellpoint Capital is providing affordable housing. What better place than Arkansas and Oklahoma? And what I'm starting to figure out as I travel around a little bit more with my real estate brokerage business is that the need is ever present for affordable housing. Affordable isn't low income, right? Like there's a need there as well, but just affordable for a blue collar worker who has a couple kids, 2, 3 kids, and a wife, right? Like buying a home right now isn't super attainable. It's a struggle with interest rates. And then you hear today, about things going on in Iran. Prayers go out to them. You got 92 million people in Iran without a leader. Regardless of, some people say that, that leader had some real issues and has a history of really doing some horrible things. But I'm sure there's a reason why these things are happening. But at the same time, you got 92 million people in Iran without a leader. So, it's a lot of things going on geopolitically, and that's all going to affect America and our economy, right? Outside of just interest rates, we got a lot of stuff going on. We are trying to work ourselves through that as a country, right? Outside of just our affordable housing crisis and not having inventory, rents being higher than residents can really afford today. It's just a lot of stuff going on. And so, where we fit Bellpoint Capital in our, we can't affect the whole world, right? But we can create change where we are. We're located in Arkansas, Oklahoma. As I start to look around at, neighboring states, Kansas, Missouri, Indiana, man, these states this is the Heartland, it's middle America. It's one and the same. We're all kind of like cousins, right? Close cousins. So, I can see us expanding out to some of those other states as well at some point. Texas is a different beast. Florida, coastal states, the West Coast, those it's really different, and they have similar economies where, they have mass migration. People moving to Texas and Florida in droves, right? They're leaving the West Coast to come to, Texas and Florida and the coastal areas for, taxation, quality of life. Sometimes it's, political reasons why they want to leave those areas. And some of those people are landing like in Heartland is what I call it, middle America. They're not going to Florida, it's too expensive. They're not going to, Texas. Probably it's a little bit more expensive, or, sometimes it's a quality of life thing too, right? Like, do you want to raise your kids in Jacksonville, Florida? Maybe not. Maybe you land in Arkansas, maybe you land in Missouri or Oklahoma City, or you land in Springdale, Arkansas, or you land in Columbia, Missouri. It's great places to raise children. I think the need for affordable housing is super important here. The operators that get their hands on the assets in middle America have a huge responsibility. I'm starting to see really big private equity groups from, Colorado and California and Texas. They're starting to buy assets in Arkansas, and not just in Northwest Arkansas where Bentonville is located. So it was a stretch where, only private equity groups were looking in that Springdale, Fayetteville, Rogers, Bentonville area. Centerton, huge. Like a little blip between Bentonville and Rogers. It's Centerton. Huge market, right? It's like the prices are so expensive there. There's a little salt and sub market in between. But I'm seeing private equity groups buy in El Dorado, Searcy, Conway. I'm seeing them buy in places like Muskogee, Oklahoma, Norman, Oklahoma, just some of these smaller markets outside of maybe like a tertiary market of some of these bigger areas. Everybody knows Little Rock, but everybody doesn't know Jacksonville, Arkansas, right? But the bigger private equity groups, they understand that. And I think it's a really big responsibility to own those assets. Not only just pricing, understanding your pricing, some of those fundamentals that may work in some of those bigger metro areas where mass migration is happening and huge job centers and things of that nature. You got to be really careful going into those markets. Me being, I'm from Richmond, Virginia, but I've lived in middle America for 15 years now. My entire adult life has been here. I grew up on the East Coast, but I've been here for a very long time, and I really understand the psychology of people in middle America, what makes them tick, what kind of life they want to live and why they want to live it, and the churches they go to, because I go to their same churches. I'm neighbors, and I understand the psychology. I really implore the bigger groups to really understand that, right? And this message may never reach them, but if I can get my hands on more access to things that in this location and this region and in this area of the country, what I would do is really be able to understand the things they want, right? Yeah, they want a place for their pets to play, they want a pet park, they may not care about the EV charging stations that are so cool in, Dallas, Texas, or, the covered carports. Maybe some of that stuff is cool, but, they don't want to pay, $100 more for a parking space in Jacksonville, Arkansas. I can guarantee you that. They want their quality of life to improve, right? Connectivity, those are things that matter. You start to go to certain areas like El Dorado, maybe they got one or two internet companies. Like, does your property have fiber internet, right? Having a bulk internet, contract with the fiber company may be a huge value add to your customers and your clients and your residents. Just really understanding them. I think that's something that I add and Bellpoint Capital adds, is understanding the psychology of the people here. We know the owners through my brokerage business. I meet owners all the time. Just met an 82-year-old gentleman today. He's owned a property since it was built in the 90s. He's considering selling at this point. It's not because he needs the money, and he's not going to owner finance it either, because he's 82 years old. He's going to do a 20-year owner finance for it. He's just looking for somebody who can come in and add value to something he's been nurturing for 33 years, longer than I've been alive, right? So understanding that person, I understand this guy. I've had lunch, I've had coffee, I've met his family. That's what he wants. He wants somebody to take this asset over, continue to push what he's been cultivating over 30 plus years. His residents, right? Talking to one of the residents today at his property, she's got 3 kids and she finally gets to relax when the kids are off to school, full-time single mom. What matters to her, right? Adding amenities that matter to her. So understanding your resident base, understanding the demographics. It is hard for you to really understand the demographics when you're buying an asset unless it doesn't necessarily have to be in your backyard, but somebody in your team has to understand that demographic and that client and that resident. The owner of Ferrero Rocher, the chocolate company with the gold wrappers, he called his customer Mrs. Valeria. I want to say that, in Valeria, they have this very special chestnut, I believe it is. It was only really grown there, and it actually reduced the cost of the chocolates that he makes, right? It's the epicenter of this specific chestnut. And, he calls his customer Mrs. Valeria. He understood it. He gave his customer a name. I thought that was so cool, and I always revert back to that when I think about the residents' experience and what they need. I think you really got to understand them. It's not just about the building. The building is just the building. It's just like a church. A church building, you can make it as big as you want, as extravagant edifice as you want. But if it's it's bad people inside of it, or they're not connected, then it's nothing. It's just a building, right? Same thing with real estate. You got to understand the demographics of the asset, especially when you're dealing with residential, because it's people, right? The people make up the asset. You can do whatever you want. Like, commercial's a little bit different, like retail and industrial and self-storage, a little bit different. Residential, especially multifamily, you're dealing with people at the end of the day. And if you're not serving those people, like, they're not going to continue to transact with you. And anytime you're buying a multifamily asset, you need the rents to go up. You need the expenses to either stabilize or decrease. Like, you can't have increased expenses that outpace your income and your rent growth. Like, if you got 5% income expense growth and you got 2% rent growth, that's a recipe for disaster. Obviously, not taking care of your residents and not understanding them will increase your expenses. It just will, whether it's turnover costs, not being happy with the property, repairs and maintenance, they're not taking care of it like it's a home, which is already a struggle with residential anyway. Residents not necessarily understanding that, hey, look, this can be a home for you. I know that, our president and our government wants the population at large to be homeowners and have a sense of ownership. Like, that's one of the things that makes this country amazing, right? It's, hey, whatever you can dream, whatever you can, create for yourself, and whatever value you can bring to the marketplace, you could be rewarded in a major way, unlike anywhere else in the world. You know what I mean? And with that comes ownership and freedom and all the different things that are awesome about this country. But there is a need for renters. There is a need for somebody to work the fast food restaurant, to be a custodian, or those jobs that you don't dream about when you're a kid. But at the same time, we need all these different things. We just do for this economy to go. So there will always be a renter. And for us to really be good stewards, we have to take care. Multifamily operators, investors, owners, like, it's a really big responsibility to understand that demographic and understand that, hey, they need a home too. And just getting into a property and painting the brick white, putting in a dog park, and then raising the rents, and then charging them for utilities, and then their gross rent, their gross rent is $400 more than it was 2 years ago, and they've been at this property for 10 years. Know your renter base. There's a place for that, right? You get an asset that hasn't been touched for 15 years, and just the organic rent growth, right? Not a value add necessarily that, you're being speculative. Like, hey, the property across the street rents for $300 more. This property over here that I'm buying just has to to catch up to that. You find that type of opportunity, that's just the free market. You know what I'm saying? Like, we understand that, but just understand what opportunity you're going into. If the data doesn't support it, don't force it into trying to make it something and then trying to flip the property to somebody else. That's opportunistic, and I don't think that's right. I do think there's a time and a place for that strategy, but I think that you have to really understand the owner of Fiero Rocher. You got to understand, I would call them Mrs. Resident, Mr. and Mrs. Resident. You got to understand them, and every property is different. Every city is different. So don't come from all different places over the country, Northeast, Denver, Miami, New York City, and then find the Heartland, find Middle America, fall in love with the prices. You know, just look at the macro data and then say, hey, I'm just going to come in with this huge value add strategy. I think that's a recipe for disaster. I've made that mistake, being naive and not understanding what I was getting into. And then I really quickly understood, hey, this region of America is different than any other. By and large, it is a conservative demographic. By and large, Christian demographic. By and large, there's several kids there, right, in the household, as opposed to like Florida or somewhere like New York or even California. It's different. It's not what you see on TV, like the Friday Night Lights. Oh, some of y'all remember that TV show and that movie with is it Booby Miles? I think it's Booby Miles. Think about Odessa, Texas or something like that. That's not what you see, right? But there is a lot of similarities in the different, because I've traveled around with my brokerage. You know, we'll do about 150 million in volume this year. We'll sell about 43 deals in Arkansas and Oklahoma, and we'll start expanding out to some different middle America states soon. But you know, it is a lot of the same. There is a lot of that Odessa, Texas vibe around, especially when you drive through Arkansas. I mean, you could drive 5 hours in Arkansas and see nothing but timber, land for timber and hunting land and cattle and Tyson chicken farms and OK Foods chicken farms. You can go 4 or 5 hours and that's all you see. But at the same time, as you start to get into some of the more populated areas that are starting to be a little bit more attractive, like I said, Searcy, Conway, Little Rock, Fayetteville, Springdale, Jacksonville, Fort Smith, Skokie, Norman, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Owasso, all these different cities that are starting to become more popular to, you know, investors at large looking for investing opportunities. Just really implore them to understand the demographic. That's it. Understand your customer. Maybe partner with a local operator like us. Help you understand this area a little better rather than you just spraying all over the region, buying assets and not understanding what you're getting into. Not that we know, so much more than everybody else, but this is home for us, right? This is home. So I think it's very important for private equity groups, larger investors to really understand, especially, you guys too, having control over people's retirement funds and insurance companies giving you loans and Freddie and Fannie, all these different people who really trust in you to find quality opportunities and bring a solid business plan and be an operator that has a fiduciary responsibility to bring returns. You got to do well for your shareholders first, but also your communities that you enter into is very important. And even us, Bellpoint Capital, like we gotta take care of our responsibilities too in serving not only our shareholders but the residents, like the community at large. Shouldn't leave anywhere worse than when you came. It should be significantly better. So that's something I've had to learn too. It's not something that I used to think you just get in there, you spend $5,000 per door, remodel floors, paint, get a new resident in, raise the rent, and then that was the game. But it's more to that. It's more to it. So I hope this brought immense value to you. And bellpointcapital.com/invest. I mean, like I said, we're finding deals all the time in this Heartland region of America, and we'd love to partner with other operators. Just continue to bring value.